Hello and welcome to another video, and today it is the 28th of August, and there's a lot of news that I will get into now. So, first of all, I talked about this yesterday, but in the Antonovsky Bridge area, there was satellite images that were released of the barge bridge that is being built, and the latest satellite imagery shows that about 630 meters of the barge bridge has already been built, which means that there's about 340 meters left. So I would say it's about like 0.4 miles, something like this. And then you have about like 0.2 miles left afterwards to be built. And there's a video over here that I have linked showing some ferries going across the river, and the bridge itself is intact. There is no damage to the pillars or anything. I'm sure there still are some craters or like impacts, but again, it's still standing. No traffic though. No cars are passing through. So it is probably under repair at the moment. That's what I'm thinking. And in the Novakakovka area, there was again a strike which was geolocated to this facility over here, the Sokol factory, and there probably was some damage done over there, although there wasn't a video I can find of the factory itself, just from the apartments nearby that were showing the smoke rising up. On the front line itself, there was some footage that I geolocated actually right outside of Mirny, which does again confirm that it's under the Ukrainian control, although it is very hotly contested at the moment. Mirny, there's a warehouse located right outside of the town itself, and Russia, they released a video of them striking this warehouse and whatever is inside of it. So from the get-go, I already could tell that it was geolocated to this area, so I geolocated this one myself. And the video's there if you're interested in looking at it. In the Mykolaiv part of the front, the 18th Separate Marine Battalion of the 35th Brigade released a video where the unit said that they were refusing to fight, and I could count about 30 people in this video, so that means that their unit did probably suffer some heavy losses, which might play a role in why they are in open mutiny. In addition to this, the Russians, they announced that they destroyed over 40% of one of the battalions of the 63rd Mechanized Brigade in the same general area of Mykolaiv, of the Mykolaiv front, and they weren't very specific about which battalion it was, but they did say that it was mainly due to Russian airstrikes. In addition to all of this, the Russians, they claimed to have destroyed an ammunition depot within Mykolaiv itself, while Ukraine, they just stated that they destroyed 2 ammo depots in southern Ukraine, which could be either in the Kherson region or Zaporizhia. I'm not sure, but they didn't give any specific locations for this statement. And they did claim that as a result of their strikes, that they killed 35 Russian troops, destroyed 1 MSTA-B howitzer, 1 Nona mortar system, and 9 armored vehicles. So that's really it for the Kherson region. The front lines themselves were pretty static, although I will get into why that might change at the end of the video. Let's move on to the Enerhodar situation, where Russia apparently sent evidence to the UN Security Council that Ukraine was behind the shelling of the power plant on August 25th. so they will have to look through that evidence. And they did claim to have destroyed an M777 howitzer in the Maharnets city, which they say is being used to shell the power plant. And right before I started recording this video, the Russian sources, specifically the authorities within the Enerhodar city council, they claimed that the Ukrainians had sent a kamikaze drone towards the nuclear fuel storage facility, and I'm pretty sure that it's located over here. You can see the facility, and the kamikaze drone was shot down, and it wouldn't be the first time that a kamikaze drone was shot down over the power plant. I did talk about it previously, and we will await some footage that shows the remnants of this drone just to confirm that this actually happened. Now, in the area of southern Crimea, which I thought was pretty interesting because it's very deep into Crimea, in this area around here, in this coastal town, Simiez, there was a video released of Russian air defense systems engaging with some sort of target, although I'm not sure if there was even a target. Maybe it was a miss trigger and they were just firing into the air. Maybe there was some small scale drone that somehow reached this point, but either way, it's the most deep a drone has ever gotten into the Crimean Peninsula besides the Kerch, the Kerch drone, which was shot down. It's like 170 miles away, so that's a lot. As I said before, it could probably be drones that are stationed within Crimea being launched by saboteurs, and this goes really hand in hand with what I was about to talk about with the situation in Mikhailivka, where we first of all had the murder of the head of the town's military civilian administration, and now the police chief of this town was also killed. And this guy was apparently a former border guard in Ukraine. His name was Andriy Rishkov, and he was found hung. And I think it's pretty safe to say that it was some Ukrainian, either a local resistance or it was SBU infiltrators that were able to make it into the border regions and to these towns around here and carry out the attacks similar to some of the stuff that's occurred within Russia itself. And they have inflicted now heightened damage in the past week or so. We already had one attack in Mikhailivka, and then there was also another one in Berdyansk. So the number of these attacks is going up, so the SBU has really stepped up their game. Now, let's move on to the strike that occurred on Melitopol. So there was this factory around here that was hit, and there was a video that I linked to in this description around here, which showed that there was some extensive damage. It was probably maybe HIMARS or some other MLRS fire, but yeah, it did some damage. People were saying that it was an airstrip or something, but no, this is it's some factory. It might have produced maybe equipment that could be utilized by the military, or potentially it was some civilian factory. But yeah, it was hit and will probably not be operational. Now, the more interesting events occurred around the Vuhledar front, where I do have to admit I was wrong about the mapping of the front lines, because there was some footage released that showed tank fire by Russians towards a Ukrainian target, and the Ukrainian target was geolocated to this area right over here, which is right north of Novomayorsk, and that just confirms that the front line is a bit more towards the south. Although I will say most of this area is probably still no man's land around here, but that does mean that Russia is farther away from this key highway supplying the Vuhledar front than I had originally thought. And that does mean that potentially even Shevchenko is contested at the moment, and we'll have to see if there's any changes because the video did show that Russia was advancing, although they were advancing towards a direction that I had already thought that they were in control of. And that also means probably that Pavlivka is also fully under Ukrainian control, given the fact that there was some footage from the fighting around the Yaharivka area a bit to the north. I did see a video of it, so I will try to add in the marker and the geolocation. I think it was just geolocated northeast of Yaharivka, but not really within Pavlivka itself. Now, let's move on to the situation around Marinka, where there was a video posted by Russians of an abandoned Ukrainian truck, and it was apparently just a Soviet produced equipment, and it seems as if this is most of what Ukraine is using, especially in these urban battles. And it was just crazy that they had a lot of weapons caches that were abandoned, and the situation in Marinka itself is just devastating, with each house incurring at least some damage, although I can't really tell what the exact situation is in terms of the front lines. Although I will say every day Russia does probably advance a few meters closer and closer towards the Druzhby Avenue. But again, this is pretty minimal gains because of the heavy fighting around here, which has probably exhausted the DPR forces by now. They might have to take some sort of pause in their advance around here. Same thing around Krasnohorivka. In the Pesky area, the same thing could probably apply. I don't really have much to add on, but I will say that there was a Russian strike on the town Kurakhove over here, which is a key town that I would say is one of Russia's main goals. I've talked about it before that they would probably want to reach this town in a pincer move at some point, and they did strike the command post of the 54th Brigade around here and did inflict some damage. They did say that in the past day or so, they've hit 20 command posts of the Ukrainian armed forces and 42 of their firing positions, although they did not give specific locations for each one of these strikes. This is just one example of Russia's either Air Force strikes or artillery strikes. I'm not sure what it was. Now, the most interesting news of the day occurred around Kodema, where there were preliminary reports that the entire town did fall to the Russian forces, and I did see this on some Telegram channels that are pretty pro-Russia, and I was inclined to believe this, but there was, first of all, no footage. Which, sure, you can expect footage to trickle in a few days after the capture of a town. That is understandable. You don't want to give away your positions to the enemy in your newly taken over positions, because they do have an understanding of the terrain and the locations because they were just entrenched in there, so they could pretty easily fire to wherever you recorded. So I do understand that for whatever security purposes, but it seems as if most of the mainstream Russian sources have not really adopted this news. They haven't really confirmed it just yet. Everyone's saying that it's unconfirmed, so I won't change my map either until it is still confirmed. Before this new development, the fighting was really centered around these two main um, posts around here, the postal center and the Christian church. And the fighting just occurred around here. Those were the two main nodes of defense for the Ukrainian forces, and if the town was to fall, then it would mean that these two strongholds were overrun, and that the warehouse around here was also taken, in addition to all the civilian houses. So I'm not sure if that's the case. I'm going to hold out. The only footage that I've seen in the Kodema area was really just a picture of a sign that says Kodema, and that could have been at the entrance to the town. I'm not sure, but it does mean that Russia is obviously fighting in the Kodema itself, so I'm not trying to deny that. Let's entertain it for a second, the fact that it could have happened, and let's assume it did. How would the Russians tap into this new success and continue their advance? Well, I would say, first of all, the Ukrainians in this area around here, in the yellow highlighted area, they would be forced to withdraw. So you could see then the front line looking more like this as the Russians approached this road around here. And this is the final road between the Russians and this other town around here called Mykolaiivka Druha, which is a very important town in terms of getting control of this highway around here. So let's say they get in control of Mykolaiivka Druha, they would have a pretty good shot at controlling the heights on the eastern part of the highway and on the western part of the highway, which can then be used to fire upon Zelenopilia, Ozaryanivka, and Kurdimumivka. And these three towns are necessary in order to dislodge the fortified positions of the Ukrainians in the southern outskirts of Bakhmut. And I would say they should do this before actually assaulting Bakhmut head on. You do want to solidify your ground before actually going on head first into Bakhmut. So let's say they solidified control around here, then they could advance along this road around here, and they would have a better shot at advancing around Zaitsev and Vesela Dolina. Now, that's probably why we haven't seen any real advances of the Wagner PMCs in the eastern outskirts of Bakhmut. They are probably working on commencing the plan that I talked about a second ago. So look out for that. I do expect something similar to occur, especially once Kodema falls, and if it did fall, then I expect it to happen very soon. In the Yakovlivka area, there was some new footage released of the fighting around here, and it was not within the residential buildings, but it was probably occurring around these fields around here. These yellowish colors are pretty distinguished in the area around Yakovlivka, so I can tell it's in this area. And it was also mentioned by the people who posted the video. So they were using binoculars, and with the binoculars they could pretty much see the town. So I would say they're not in it just yet, although there was the video of the BMPs reaching the highway around here, but they were struck, so they were probably forced to retreat back to their previous fortifications along here. And then the no man's land is probably all of this right now, so it would be Russia's goal, first of all, to get a secure position in these residential buildings south of the road, and then advance towards the town itself. And one way they can do this, which has been mentioned, is that they apparently already have control of the eastern flank of Yakovlivka. Some maps do show this, and if this was the case, then I would say Russia really should, first of all, overrun the hedgerow positions around here, and then advance along this open field towards the eastern outskirts of Yakovlivka. So let's zoom in on this for a second. There are a few hedgerows around here too, and a minor pond, which could be overrun, and then you could have a two-pronged attack on Yakovlivka itself. One thing that I forgot to add about the Bakhmut front is that the Ukrainians have set up their first humanitarian centers for Bakhmut residents in the city Dnipro, which, if you don't know already, is over here. So they're already preparing for a mass forced evacuation of the civilians in this area, and this has been going on for a while in Donetsk, and it's already getting started now in Kharkiv, in Zaporizhia, Nikolaev. So this is pretty clearly done, at least in Bakhmut, to clear out the civilians. So then all of the apartments and all of the residential blocks can be used as staging grounds to prolong the battles in the city itself. And now that there are barely any civilians in Bakhmut, the Wagner PMCs have been filmed starting to use TOS 1A heavy flamethrowers, and we saw those used in Avdiivka, we saw them used in Pesky, and now they're making their way to Bakhmut. It is a very effective weapon to be utilized in urban warfare, so I do expect the Russians to use it a lot right now. Now, let's move on to the situation in Kramatorsk, Slavyansk, where in the city Slavyansk, the Russians struck the deployment positions of the 95th Airborne Assault Brigade, and then there were many explosions in the Kramatorsk area, and then earlier today there was a video released of damage done to the train tracks in one of the railways in Kramatorsk. That's really it for this area. So I will get into the Kharkiv front now, where there was a report of Russian recon operations in the area of Pitomnik around here. So they are trying to infiltrate this area now. In addition, there was a video of Russians in the Udi area, which I tried geolocating because I thought it would be pretty easy because Udi isn't that large of a town, but I did fail to find the exact location after looking for 15 minutes. So I'm just going to presume that it's in this area, but there's no way to know for sure. And this would confirm at least some of Russia's gains that they made around this area of the front line in Kharkiv over the past 2 weeks. Once we get confirmation of Udi, then we would have to just look out for Odnorabivka and Huriv Kozachok, because those two towns are also being disputed by Ukrainian sources. Some are saying that it's still under Ukrainian control, although this is not known. We don't know the status of these towns at the moment. So, in total, the Russians claim to have destroyed about 200 troops in the Kharkiv direction. And again, I'm not too familiar with Russia's jargon in terms of casualties when they say destroyed, if that means killed or wounded. But yeah, that's still a significant number. The Ukrainians reported in the Sumy region that Russia fired 220 projectiles and mortars yesterday, so that's a pretty high amount around here. Just a lot of cross-border shelling. And there are two final things that I would like to talk about now. First of all, there was news from this Austrian tabloid called Express that the murderer, allegedly, of Daria Dugina, Natalia Vovk, was actually murdered in her rental apartment in presumably Vienna. And what's being said is that she was stabbed 17 times, and there was a photo that was provided, but it was blurred out, and it was of a woman in her bed, and she did look pretty familiar to Natalia Vovk, but the image was blurred out, so we don't actually know who it was. And they didn't really cite any sources in this article. The only other people that were talking about this alleged murder were some more obscure pro-Russia sources on Telegram, but besides that, there wasn't really any elaboration on what had occurred. And the Austrian Internal Affairs Ministry, they denied these rumors, so I'm pretty sure this is just another lie, falsehood. So now the more serious thing to talk about is that the 3rd Army Corps is finally being sent to the front lines now, and they were training in the Mulino training ground in Nizhny Novgorod Oblast. So this is Mulino, and you see there is a lot of training ground around here for these forces, and they're volunteers from all over Russia. From the photos that I saw in the videos, they do look like they're on the older side, but they are equipped with some of the latest Russian weaponry. So I'm going to get into some examples of this. They have Tornado U trucks. They have Buk M2 air defense systems. They have Kamaz Typhoon armored vehicles. They have the new AK-12 variations. And they also have a lot of T-90 tanks that were filmed. And I'm sure they have a lot of new armor as well. So these volunteers and this entire corps in general is heavily equipped, and they're being sent to the front lines. They were filmed in the area of, let me find it, in the area around the border between Russia and Ukraine. Right over here. You have a train station over here, the Uspenka train station, and there was videos of equipment being transported from the Russian border to the DPR side. And we don't exactly know where this is being sent. There are some rumors, specifically from the Institute for the Study of War, which is, again, not the most reliable source, that they're being sent to the Donetsk city front, or that they're being sent to the Kherson front, which is why I mentioned that before. And here's the thing about army corps in Russia. I'm not sure what counts as an army corps in Russia. I just know that in America, we have 2+ divisions in an army corps, and that can consist of about 20,000 to 45,000 soldiers. So if that's the same classification that is used in Russia, then that would be a very significant number and could actually change the pace of the war. But I'm pretty sure that Russia does use smaller units in comparison to the rest of the world. They are pretty notorious for that. So when Russia uses the word corps, I'm not sure if they're using the same terminology as I'm accustomed to when Americans mention the word corps or something like that. But I do think it would be a good idea to use these new trained forces in the area around the Donetsk city, because the DPR troops around there are very exhausted, as I talked about before, and if they want to continue the operation to push forward and create a buffer zone around the Donetsk city to prevent further shelling, then it would be a very good idea to send in these newly trained, very fresh troops with the highly equipped, and they could push pretty deep into Donetsk Oblast itself and help with ending the Battle of the Donbass, and then, of course, the focus could shift towards the south. So that's it for today. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you later.